Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar. First of all, thank you so much for joining. So today we are going to talk about something that I think it's very important for every embedded system engineer right now. How AI is changing embedded system interviews and hiring. If you are preparing for a job switch, targeting companies like Qualcomm, Nvidia, Intel, Bosch, TI, or other product-based companies, so this session is specially for you. Now I know many of you may have question like, is AI going to replace embedded engineers? Are companies changing the way they interview? What skills should I focus in 2026? And most importantly, how should I prepare differently now? So that's exactly what we are going to discuss today. And don't worry, this is not going to be a session where I just talk about AI for an hour. I'm going to show you what is actually changing, what fundamentals are becoming more and more important, what companies are looking for, and a practical roadmap you can follow to prepare for your next interviews. So stay with me till the end because we will also share how you can put all of your preparation together in a structured way. And all right, let's get started. And before that, just a note for all of you guys. So whatever your questions you have during these sessions, please hold on to that and put all. So we will be taking all of your question at the end of this session, right? So let's quickly start. So first of all, like how the AI is changing the embedded system hiring basically, and this whatever I am listing out here, this is not followed by all the companies, but most of the companies are now following the same pattern for hiring in nowadays. So first of all, AI assisted screening. So your resume, whatever the resume you are submitting to the companies, so they all are being screened by the AI assistants. All right. So your resume should be having a good keyword match until, so otherwise your resume will not be selected for the interview, right? And of course the AI also in the coding loops. So recently few of our bootcamp member joined Cisco interviews. So Cisco has one round of basically interview in which they will give you the assignment and they will ask you to complete it by using the AI. So this is how the companies are basically utilizing AI for hiring, right? So if you don't know anything about AI, if you don't know how to use the AI tool, so definitely you will be not be able to focus on how to do that project given in 24 hours of timeline, right? And of course the fundamental bar is basically much more than whatever we used to have. So during the time of 2021 2022, the hiring was on peak. Embedded system hiring was on peak. Even you are performing an interview 40 to 50%, they must have given you the offer. But now things has quite changed because there is layoff all around the world. So many people are available in the market. So this gives the options to the companies to basically make a decisions, choosing and doing so many rounds of interview and then make a decision accordingly. Right. So before going into the detail, I want to tell you one story. So there was a guy in our boot camp. So he was giving many interviews. He was good overall, so he has appeared in many interviews. And every time when he was coming back from the interview, he was mentioning, so he has done very well in the interviews, but still somehow he was not getting the offer, or he was getting the rejections mail. So we were also not clear like why exactly this is happening with him, right? So we ask him to basically get a clear feedback at least from a one company, so that you can come to know what exactly you are missing in the interviews. So somehow he managed that. So HR mentioned to him like, I can just tell you the direct feedback whatever interviewer has given for you. So he said like, you are able to solve the questions, you are able to solve the design, but with given hints. It means even though he has written the complete design, even though he has given the complete solution what interviewer were expecting, but because he has taken the hints for doing that, they have not moved their profile forward. So what does it mean? It means even though you are doing well in the interviews, at least you are thinking like you have done well in the interviews, but even if you are taking a small hints from the interviewer, even if you are missing 10-20% thing as well, then also you might not be getting offers, or your profile might not move forward. So that's what I want to mention it here. So this is how the bar has raised. So now companies want you to give your fundamentals at the actual depth level. Surface level knowledge is not going to help you out. So the way you were preparing earlier during your career, so that is not going to help you out. You have to dig more and more topics so that you can come up with the solutions without taking any hints from the interviewer, right? So as I mentioned, depth basically beats memorization. So earlier, if you are just remembering the difference between semaphore and mutex, that was enough for you to clear the interviews. But now that is not going to help at all. You have to understand how the semaphore is implemented, how the mutex is implemented, and if mutex is good than semaphore, then why we have semaphore into the picture. I'm just giving you an example of that. Okay, so there are a lot more things you need to focus upon. So during this session, I'm going to talk about a complete roadmap which you can follow just to prepare for all of these interviews. Okay, so what skills companies are looking now in 2020 2026 basically. So the very first thing is, like C and the memory model. So pointers, layout, storage. So this they want to grill you in deep. They don't want you just remember the concepts on the high level. That will not at all help you, right? Then the second thing is how you basically debug the issue, how you find the root cause of the issues, right? And then, like, depending upon your technology you are working upon, if you are working on auto side, so what depth you are coming up with. If you are working on Linux internal side, so what level of understanding you have with respect to Linux kernel, right? We'll talk about what topics you need to focus in coming slides, right? And then reading and reasoning on the code, like how you can explain the critical code, how you can discuss the same code with your team, right? And then what are the projects you have listed in your resume and how you basically tell or explain your projects, right? And how you are using AI tools. So you have to basically tell them how AI helped you in your day-to-day task. So did you really has developed some tools using the AI which is increasing your productivities? So you should be able to explain that in very well manner, right? So as per like our all the boot camps and the program, basically we divide embedded system into preparation into three layers. So the very first layer is your core C fundamental. Second layer is your role specific knowledge. Okay. So when I see role specific knowledge, it means if you are coming from BSP background, so BSP related knowledge is going to help. Let's say bootloader and the memory. All right. So this is going to help you out. If you are coming from firmware background, then firmware specific your fundamentals, that is going to help you out, right? If you're coming from RTOS, so that is going to help you out. If you're coming from automotive, so that is going to help you out, right? The third thing is project explanation. So we have seen people has done a lot of things during their career or the current company or the previous companies. They have done very good projects, but still when it comes to explain the projects, they somehow lack the confidence while explaining their project, right? So we are also going to talk about how to explain your project in a such way that people will find it interesting and they will pay attention to the project which you have done. Because we have seen people will make it so complex, interviewer is not going to find an interest in that, and then definitely he will not ask more questions from that. If you will not more ask questions from that, then don't think it's good for you, it's a bad for you. It means they don't want to explore your projects. So that is a bad thing, right? Now let's talk about the very first thing which we should focus, which is C fundamentals and the practice basically. And before going further, I want to just let you know, in case if there is some network uh, issues from our end, and somehow if I like you are not able to hear me, just wait for a couple of minutes, we will be back, because today we are facing the network issues at our end. Okay, so yeah, so C fundamentals, what you should focus. So pointers, memory layout, storage class, bit manipulation, compilation pipeline, structure, union. So these are the high level topics which you should focus. But I'm not uh, saying you don't know about this. You already know about this, but we are going to talk about what depth of concept you have to understand before going for an interview, right? For all of these topics, right? So first of all, the pointers. So I have listed out what exactly you should practice with respect to the pointers and from the pointers whenever you're going for an interview. So from the pointers, pointer arithmetic play an important role. So you should practice a lot of questions with respect to the pointer arithmetic so that you can predict the output if asked in the real time in your interviews, right? Then pointer to pointer, it means double pointers, like how exactly this works, how you can allocate memory using the double pointer, where exactly you use double pointer in your real time projects. then function pointers, void pointers, and then what are the common pitfalls with respect to the pointers basically. So the pitfalls, if you can see it, like what is dangling pointer, and what uninitialized pointer can cause issue, what is wild pointer, what is invalid dereference, and what are the issues we can face because of these pitfalls. So we should be clear about that. With respect to memory layout, we should be clear about like how the memory layout of a C programs work, how the memory, basically how the C program is loaded into the memory. I'm talking about linker loader and all those stuff. You have to understand very well. Okay, I'm just highlighting the high level topics, but you have to dig it more and more, so that you have to go into the deep of that or depth of that basically, right? And then global sections, and then local, like, and then of course we are talking about memory, so we should be very clear about like how the stack overflow uh, basically happens, and how to debug the stack overflow, how to avoid the stack overflow. So, and also you have to tell like if, do you really has faced any issue with respect to the stack overflow in your projects or your day-to-day task, and how did you debug that, right? So my point here is, if you will just remember or memorize the concept, that is not going to help you out. Okay, so now let's talk about storage classes. So in the storage classes is basically, of course, static, external, volatile. You have to know all of this. So you have to understand what is the lifetime of each type of storage classes, what is the scope of each type of storage classes. You have to practice few tricky questions as well. Recently, one of the guy from our bootcamp has given the entry of Marvel. So there was a simple question asked from him. There is a one variable in a given file which has like defined with the static keyword as well as extend keyword. So what will be the effect of that? So he was not able to answer that, right? So even though you know concepts very well, so but you have to practice few tricky questions around that, so that you will have good confidence while going for an interview. Other is bit manipulation. So bit manipulation, like we are embedded system engineers. In our day-to-day task, we play a lot with the registers, right? And then when it comes to the registers, we play a lot with the bit manipulations. Like we should very clear about how to set a bit, how to clear a bit, how to toggle a bit, right? How masking works, how we can packing the different bit in a single registers basically, sorry, in a single integer, right? How the shifting works, how the indianness play an important role in bit manipulations, right? How the storage or alignment works with respect to bit manipulation. So that all we have to focus upon. And then compilation sequence also play an important role, because we are embedded system engineers. We should know inside out of our systems. So we should know like how our C program is basically compiled, how our C program is basically going to resolve the dependencies, I mean to say the functions which you are having in your program, but they are defined somewhere else in the libraries. I'm talking about linking basically, how the loader is going to work, what is static linking, what is dynamic linking, what is loading, how the loading basically works, right? So these all things we have to focus before going for an interview, right? And then let's talk about structure and union. Structure and union also play an important role in all of our projects. We use structure and union a lot, right? So with respect to structure and union, you should know like what is, like how the structure declaration and definition works, what is the size of structures, what is the padding, and how you can avoid padding, what is the effect of padding, what is alignment, how exactly the alignment works, how you maintain alignment using the structures and union, or how the memory layout of a structure and the union differ. Is there any difference between structure and union with respect to the memory arrangement of its element, right? So all those things which we have to focus upon, and how you can allocate memory dynamically for the structures, how you can allocate memory, as well as how you can find the offset of an element of a structure. So these kind of things you have to focus upon, right? So now we have talked about C fundamentals, but many people has confusion like, okay, fundamentals I know like what I should focus upon, but with respect to programming, what level of programming should I practice? Should I practice the programs from the lead code? Should I spend more and more time in the DSA? Should I practice dynamic programming, backtracking, hashing, and all these things? So I'm going to talk about that. What exactly being an embedded system engineer, even though you are targeting Qualcomm, Nvidia, AMD, and all these companies, what level of C programming you should focus upon? So the thing is, from the array and string, you should practice like reverse array, string in place, rotate array by k element, find first non-repeating element, merge to sorted array, remove duplicates, string operations like manual string length, string copy, str. These you have to practice. Okay, first of all, just to give you the clear idea, for clearing an embedded system interviews in a good companies, you don't need to go or spend so much time on the DSA side, right? Until unless you are targeting Fang or Mang companies, let's say you are targeting Google, then definitely they will expect more DSA than Qualcomm, Nvidia, and other semiconductor companies are expecting, right? So you have to practice in that way. Now, pointers and memory. So definitely you have to practice a lot of programs, a lot of C programming. You have to practice where you use uh, the pointers and the memory related structures which are provided by our C programming, right? So linked list. So with respect to DSA, linked list, stack, queue, these are the topics which are enough for you to prepare for embedded system interviews. So with from the linked list, basically, this is like detect and remove the loop, reverse of linked list, merge two sorted linked list, find the middle node using slow fast pointers, delete node with only given a single pointer basically, right? So bit manipulation you already talked about. You should know like how to count the set bits and in an optimized way. We have seen, if you will ask some question from someone like, okay, count the set bits, so they will start utilizing the loop basically. So they will loop from starting from the 0th bit to the 31st bit. So that is not going to help. You have to come up with the optimized solution, right? So definitely everyone can count the number of set bits from a given integer, but you have to come up with an optimized solution, right? Then how to check a bit, set a bit, clear a bit, toggle a bit, so that you should know very well, right? And then swap using XOR operator, how you can extract the bit fields, how you can reverse the bits, 32 bits of a 32-bit given integer, and then check if the number is a power of 2. So basically, these kind of questions you should practice from the bit manipulation. And then recursion and backtracking you can practice like, but not that much difficult elite level, medium or hard question don't need to practice. You can just focus upon factorial, Fibonacci, tower of Hanoi, string permutations, subset generations, all these things you can practice, right? And then you should have clear idea about basic searching and sorting, like how the binary search works, how the quick sort works, how the merge sort basically works, right? With respect to stack and queues, implement the stack using array, implement stack using linked list, implement queue, circular queue, validate parentheses, and postfix expression accumulation. So basically, these all things you have to focus from stack and queue, right? And then debugging, as I already mentioned, you should be very clear about it. You should be able to predict the output of a given program, or you should be basically you should be able to tell what is the issue in given code or snippet of the code basically, right? Then system design, of course, system design is playing a lot of important role nowadays. They are going to ask, design your own debounce logic or implement your own debounce logic, design your own memory pool, design your own timer lamp library basically, right? Design a queue which can works in a multi-threaded environment. How you are going to basically take manage that. So these all things will come into the pictures when you will start giving interviews, or if you are already giving interviews, so you must have seen these kind of questions, right? So, and then on top of that, we talk about core embedded concept you should know. So even though you're coming from automotive background, even though you're coming from bare metal background, even though you're coming from multimedia background, anything you are working with in embedded system field, so there are basic fundamentals of embedded system which you should know, and we cannot leave this concept. So like ISR, so what exactly interrupt, how the interrupt is basically handled, what is priority, what is latency, what debouncing logic, what exactly debouncing is, what is watchdog timer, how watchdog timer play an important role, boot process, then how the memory map register works, how the polling versus interrupt works, right? How the DMA works. So all these things we should focus, right? Now, whatever we have talked about C and basic embedded system concept, these are important for you irrespective of your domain. So now we'll talk about your domain specific part. So generic stuff you have to know irrespective of what domain you are coming from, but now you should have role specific knowledge as well. So if you are having RTOS in your resume, you have to know more and more or depth of RTOS. If you have Linux kernel in your resume, you should know internals of kernel very well. Right? We'll talk about that. We will talk about two roles specific because we cannot cover each and every role, but we'll talk about the role specific things which we have to focus. So if you are an RTOS engineer, if you are targeting firmware bare metal RTOS role, so but you should focus. So RTOS fundamentals, synchronization, interrupt handling, debugging, timing concepts, memory management, design problem that you have to focus, right? So from RTOS fundamentals, you should be very clear about what exactly the RTOS is, how the task model basically works in RTOS, how the scheduling works, what are different types of scheduling available in RTOS, when to choose which scheduling, right? What are the priority levels and what kind of determinism we have choosing when we go for some specific scheduling basically, right? Then synchronization play an important role because we are writing multi-threading applications, so synchronization will definitely come into the picture, right? So how the mutex work, what is priority inheritance, what is priority inversion, what are the deadlock scenarios, how we can avoid deadlocks, right? Semaphore, how the semaphore are used, event flags, message queues, spin lock, everything which we have to focus with respect to our RTOS fundamentals. Interrupt handling also, like how the interrupt handling works, how the nested interrupt works, what happens when we basically receive an interrupt, right? We have seen like recently one of guy gave an interview in the arm, basically ARM. Okay, so they ask, okay, start from how the interrupt is basically generated, what exactly happened, how exactly it reaches to the your kernel basically. So they ask each and everything in detail, how the GIC is going to work, basically interrupt controller, how it is going to decide on which CPU it has to forward the interrupt. So that level of understanding you should have, right? So how the context switching works, right? Then with respect to memory, you have to understand like how the stacks work, how the heap fragmentation works, okay, how the heap fragmentation affect our performance of the system or the determinism of our system. Because like being an RTOS engineer, we have to write the program which is deterministic, right? And how the memory allocations works, and then timing concept, right? How the jitters, what exactly jitter is, how deadline miss can happen, how to avoid that, right? So what is hard versus soft real time system. So we should focus on those fundamentals with respect to RTOS. When it comes to the RTOS debugging, so definitely how you can detect the deadlock, how you can basically identify the priority inversion or how you can avoid that, right? So how you can analyze the CPU load basically if you're working on the performance side, how you can debug a stack overflow, right? What are the tools you're going to use for that, right? Then definitely RTOS design coding problem also they can ask, like implement a producer consumer based queue, considering a multi-threaded environment. Circular buffer you can implement, event driven a state level you can implement, timers callback you can implement, right? So these kind of questions you can expect, right? Now this was about RTOS. Now we are going to talk about Linux kernel and drivers basically, right? So Linux kernel and drivers, if you are targeting BSP role, kernel roles, or platform engineers role, so what they are going to ask, what exactly they are going to focus upon that. So they are going to ask a lot of kernel fundamentals. We will talk about that. So kernel fundamentals, like how the user space to the kernel space communication works, how that context switching works from user space to the kernel space, how the system calls basically work, how the modules are compiled, and what happens when we compile a module, kernel module basically, how the object file of kernel is getting created, and what happens when we are doing the ins mode, right? So those all things which we should focus upon. Then of course memory management is going to play an important role, because memory management is quite complex in Linux kernel. So they will try to dig more and more, they will try to grill you more and more on that to understand like what level of understanding you have with respect to memory management, how the kmalloc versus vmalloc works, how to allocate memory at the boot time itself, or how to reserve the memory the boot time itself, how mmap works, how to copy to user, copy from user works, right? Then device driver basics, like how the probing works, what happens if probing is not happening, how you're going to port a driver, onto the new chipset, right? And then device tree basics. So those all things they are basically going to focus upon, right? So then it comes to the synchronizations like spin lock, mutex, semaphore, all kind of synchronization what are provided by Linux kernel that is going to play an important role, right? So interrupt handling also, like how you can register an interrupt in your Linux kernel driver, how the share interrupt works, how the top half versus bottom half interrupt works, interrupt context rule, measuring the ISR latency, like how you can measure the ISR latency. So these all things are basically going to be asked in the interviews. Now, kernel debugging, like what kind of logging mechanism you have in kernel, what kind of tools you have used if you are debugging a kernel issues, might be GTAG, might be simple logging mechanism, might be RAM dump analyzers. So all those things, KGDB, GDB. So all those things they are going to ask or grill you more on that. File operations is of course like how the file operations are work, how the VFS works in Linux kernel. They are going to focus on that, and then driver code walkthrough. They can ask you like how an I2C driver works in case of Linux kernel. They can grill you more on that, how a UR driver basically work, or they can ask you to just draw a design for a UART based Linux kernel driver, right? Now we have talked about the basic fundamentals we should focus upon. We have also talked about what role specific knowledge we should have before going for an interviews. Now let's talk about the third part which we focus upon, that is like project and the resume mastery, right? So we divide the project explanation into five part basically. First of all, put a problem statement. You have to speak about like what was the problem for which you are basically working on this particular project, right? What is your overall system architecture, what is your ownership, then what is your technical depth, and what are the challenges and the issues you have faced. So we have seen, if we are asking someone to explain the project, they started explain everything, so they will dump everything on the table. So at that point of time, interviewer might not be that much interested to know a depth of that basically, right? It will be difficult for him being an outsider, it will be difficult for him to understand your project. So you have to first tell the problem statement. Okay, so this was the problem which we are going to achieve. Okay, then you have to talk about system architecture by basically creating a simple diagrams or creating a simple architectures which by which he can understand and he can ask more and question from that. And also then you have to tell them your clear ownership. We have seen people will not able to tell them okay what exactly you have worked upon. They will speak a lot about their project but they will not be able to tell what exactly they worked upon that. So you should have basically mention clear ownership which you have. And then of course technical depth also will be needed. You cannot just bluff things. Okay, so this was the project I worked upon. You should know in and out of that. You should clearly know like what exactly the design considerations was made, why they have chosen this particular design. So everything you should know about it, right? And then of course what was the hardest bugs you have fixed, how you approach that, how this was escalated. Okay, so he can ask like what is the most escalated issues you have faced and how did you fix it, how did you manage to debug those issues giving the pressure of escalations, right? So then what are the mistakes 90% of candidate basically makes? So first of all, people try to basically memorize the answers, right? And then they skip the basics of C. Most of the people think, now I'm an experienced engineer, I don't need too much focus upon C programming basically. That is not going to help. You have to know more and more about it in depth basically. Then you have to practice the debugging part as well, right? And as I already mentioned, you should know the depth of all the fundamentals which you are going to put up in your resume, right? And then you have to show them your clear ownership with respect to the project which you have mentioned in your resume, right? Now how to prepare week by week basically. So you can start working on C fundamentals. You should go into deep at least for the starting of 2 weeks. You can focus on your C programming. Let's say if you're starting preparing for an interview starting from today, you can start first focusing upon see basically, go into depth of each and every fundamentals. Then you have to focus upon a whole embedded system fundamentals which we have just talked about. Then in the next week, 5, 5th and 6th, you should focus upon basically the role specific into preparation, right? And then project story also, you have to spend at least 1 week to basically talk about like how exactly the 5 pattern which we have just talked about it here. So this 5 things you should be able to explain very clearly, right? And then you should practice mock interviews. Like if no one is there to take your mock interviews, maybe you can just take your own interviews. You can speak aloud all the answers, right? So that it will give you the confidence, right? Now it comes like from where we should prepare all of these things basically, because we have talked so much about it from C, from RTOS, from Linux kernel, everything we have just spoke about, right? So this seems to be very much difficult to find everything because we have random YouTube videos available, we have different books available, we have different GitHub repos available, we have PDFs available in the internet, we have AI available nowadays, but it's looks like very difficult to basically go in a structured way. Although we have so many things available in the internet, but being an experienced engineer, it's very difficult to find time to prepare for the interview. We have seen that is a problem with most of the people, right? They don't find that much time to prepare for the interviews. So that is why basically we have designed our boot camp. So our boot camp is just basically started. So whatever we have just talked about till now, so most of the things are basically covered as part of our boot camp. So we have laid out a structured into prep program basically, which basically cover all and like whatever the topics which we have discussed, that is covered in details in this boot camp. Okay, so I'm just pinging you the link in case if you want to enroll for it, you can go for it. It's there in the chat. So this is an 8 weeks program. So where we will conduct like 3 recorded sessions per week and 1 weekly live out sessions, right? So we are going to cover everything here in this boot camp, into roadmap, C, or Linux driver, assignment, practice, everything we are going to do. And also because you joined this webinar, so we are just enabling a discount of 20%. You can just use this coupon webinar 20, so that will be available to you for next 30 minutes because we have just started our boot camp. So if you want, you can enroll for that, enroll for it. Okay, so we will be closing the enrollment. Today is the last day for that because we have already started the boot camp this week, right? And also with boot camp, people are coming up with the problem like they don't have people who can refer them or they can get the referrals in the industry. So that to solve that problem, we have our own hiring portal, which is www.embeddedhiring.in. So in that portal you can connect with the other our community member, and you can take their help to basically get the referrals. So this portal you will get for 3 months free access. You will get like when you will be part of our boot camp. So this is our private embedded system hiring portal. And I'm again mentioning here is the discount whatever I have pinged you, that will be available for the next 30 minutes, and today is the last day for enrolling for our this bootcamp 5.0, right? Yeah. So we have already done 4 batches. So these are the stories from different batches. We have received very good feedback from the people who have joined our feedbacks earlier, boot camps earlier, basically, right? So we have even people, even the who has having only the 1 year experience, they were also able to get the offer from the Qualcomm by facing the structured roadmap. So as I mentioned, you can use this code webinar 20, and this is going to be available only for the next 30 minutes, right? Now if you guys have any questions, you can ask the questions in the chat. I will be happy to help you out.